the mobile defense when we come back. I'm Dr. Christopher Larsen, a veteran of the U.S. Army Infantry, founder of One Shepherd Leadership Institute, and author of Small Unit Tactical Doctrine. Let's take a minute to recall that the area defense denies entry. The area defense, the purpose of it, its intent, is to deny our enemy opponent entry into our geographic space. And we, the area defense is, in general terms, seen as a temporary position whereby we can regain our logistics, our supplies, be reinforced. It is set on terrain that is beneficial to us and terrain that is particularly not beneficial to our enemy opponent. And so in this way, many of the martial philosophers, Clausewitz rather famously says, the area defense is stronger than the attack. And we've talked about this in past videos. We've shown why that tends to be the case, at least when the area defense is effectively managed and planned. Again, I'm mentioning the area defense to juxtapose it, that is, to compare and contrast it to the mobile defense. Now, the mobile defense does not intend to deny the enemy entry. It may very well have that impact. It may have that effect, but that's not its intent. Its intent, instead, is to deny the enemy meaningful use. If that seems vague, let's talk about an example. So, let's say the Taliban hears that U.S. forces or security forces, right, allied security forces, are going to some kind of shura with the village leaders in this town that's pivotal to, I guess both needs, right, to the Taliban's needs as being seen as dominant and the legitimate governance, as well as the Afghan/Allied needs. And so they want to go in, and let's not get into what a shura is, but they go into this shura, or at least they intend to. Off they start with their allies in tow, and they go into this big sprawling valley with high mountainous walls, and for that entire day, the Taliban come and shoot and disrupt that convoy and pull them off to other places and whatever, blow up bridges and do whatever they have to do to make sure that convoy doesn't make it on time to the shura so that they don't meet and we have disrupted then that political process. Think about that. At no point in this fictional, albeit realistic, in this fictional scenario, at no point did I suggest that the Taliban would put in concertina wire and minefields and dig trenches, and bunkers and say, none shall pass. No, that would be an area defense. And while for very brief moments it might appear as though the Taliban is going to do that, as soon as any real pressure is put on them, they fade away. And of course then we say, how cowardly! Well, not so cowardly, we do the same thing. We do it, and the doctrine is called mobile defense. We stop the enemy, our enemy, from meaningful use in our area. And we do this through a myriad of tactics, techniques, and procedures. So let's start talking about what that looks like. Once again, this is dynamic, and in that sense, it has great depth. So we'd have an engagement area that we'd want to define. Okay, and I'm going to draw a box, but let's be honest here. This might be a mountain range, and this might be a river. This could be a highway. It's just easy to show it in a box. But you're going to define a north, south, east, west boundary is my point, okay? So you define that boundary, and you say, well, this is the area I have to cover down. Now, what I want to do, let me be very clear. I don't care if I'm, the Russian military or the Taliban. It just doesn't matter. My point here is what I want to do is say, none shall pass. I want the resources to defend this entire area in depth with an area defense and artillery and tanks and, close air support and all the things I don't have. Or at least I don't have it in enough abundance that I can actually create an area defense. So I'm left with little choice but to create a mobile defense. And mobile defenses are indeed planned and managed. So then I have to determine, well, what's the enemy's likely course of action? I say, well, the enemy's going to come down this major highway through here. That's how they've done it the last 11 times they've come into our AO. And so they'll either do that, or maybe the enemy will do some kind of vertical insertion to one of the mountaintops, a vertical insertion into a mountaintop, or along a highway, or a combination of both. All right, that's what the enemy's probably going to do. So I need to start looking at terrain that's beneficial to us. Specifically, any kind of choke points. That is a tight little, valley. Not a valley, but, a passage. It's actually probably cliffs. It's a cut. It's whatever. Naturally formed or man-made. We know that's a choke point. If we get strong point defenses up here, we can hold the enemy for a while. So there you go. You're going to look for those choke points that give you a decisive advantage. Yeah, you say, well, it's all must be terrain based, or at least it's high mountain passes. No, it can also be other sort of things. Open fields can allow you, like if this is a very open area, we could set up defenses over here that allow us to use the advantage of standoff weaponry. Well, now he means artillery. Yes? But also rocket launchers, particularly anti-armor, anti-vehicle rocket launchers that give us good distance outside of normal small arm or at least rifle range. Oh, hold on. That's a standoff weaponry. Yeah, so too are improvised explosive devices, particularly those type that allow command detonation, where I can stand way back and watch the vehicles drive down Highway 1, and then one by one just start setting off a series of IEDs that can blow them up. And people say, whoa, now we can get super creative. Can I use drones to call in, IEDs, vehicle-borne IEDs? Can I use drones to deliver the IED? And the answer is yes to all the above. That's what we're saying. Standoff weaponry. Standoff weaponry gives us time and space. Now, the standoff, the time and space. Same with up here. I'm saying, oh, strong point defenses, but not really, because that's an area defense, or it's a variant of. It looks like a strong point defense until we start to lose. And the rule with mobile defense is no blood for land. It means don't die for that hilltop, because the hilltop was never our objective. It never was. This isn't a none shall pass. As soon as there's a decisive effort, be that close air support, be that, some kind of dismounted or mounted armor attack, and we look anywhere close to this is tenuous, we're not going to really win this one, we have to have escape routes. Yeah, that's right. We're going to escape. Yay, run away bravely. And we're going to relocate to a new fighting position. So we're going to escape and relocate to this one too. Let's run away bravely and go to a new fighting position. I don't know. Maybe it's a smaller hill. That's always an easy one too. But maybe it's a tree line that opens into an open field with great fields of fire where we can effectively use our standoff weaponry. The mobile defense puts up a tenacious fight, and at the moment it looks like, they're starting to flank us, we pop smoke and get the heck out of there. You've got to withdraw. So you need, very critically, you plan this, your lines of egress, and then you need to relocate into a new fighting position. Now, one of the common techniques is if you're going to allow the enemy to get right up on you, and then you go into your lines of egress, the enemy are going to want to chase you. It's very common, especially as this goes on and on and on, and they get frustrated. So what we do is called baited ambushes. We intentionally set ambushes, friendly ambushes, and with coordinated signal, we run right through them as the enemy follows suit. the ambush kicks off. So there you go. And this is just a very common thing that we're going to do. The whole time we were up here, we had an ambush sitting here. The whole time our one team was up here, we had an ambush set up here. So once again, baited ambushes. If the enemy doesn't follow suit, they go to their next fighting position, whatever that is. Again, ambush here, poorly drawn. They go to their next fighting position, right? And so this is the essence of a mobile defense, is that, again, we keep dislocating, relocating to a new angle of attack. Should we plan it? You bet we should. Can we do it on the fly? Of course you can, but it becomes very, very iffy at that point. So you should spend a lot of time getting to know this engagement area. And that is one of the advantages that we do this, that we do have, because this is our relatively safe area, because it is relatively large. Like, we can't cover down and do an area defense. We effectively get to manage this through patrolling operations, which has two advantages. First off, it helps us understand the terrain. It lets us have that advantage of known terrain, right? It also helps us detect the enemy and deny them the wonderful, advantage of, oh, this is known terrain. The enemy will constantly be guessing. This is how we do that. Well, you go, okay, that's how you do it. Where do you sit most of the time? Well, you sit in nodes, okay? Defensive nodes. These are patrol bases. They're typically hidden, because what we don't want to do inside of here, we assume the enemy outguns us, at least outnumbers us, but definitely outguns us, and we can't cover down on the whole thing. So we want to hide in a series of patrol bases, a whole bunch of them, as many as we can, but still manage them. And a patrol base says, I'm going to hide from enemy detection. Why is that so important? So they can't bring their weapon systems down on us. I can't have, their drones spot us. They call in close air support in the way of, helicopter gunships or an A-10 or whatever it is, jets and JDAMs and all of these sort of things. We're going to set a series of patrol bases up, and each patrol base has an area of responsibility that it's going to patrol and become very familiar with, and it's going to be the places they dislocate to, they relocate to. But yeah, it can have primaries and secondaries. This is how you cover down on it. It's very much a lot of people say, oh, it's a zone defense. It's not a bad way of saying it. Yeah, it's called a mobile defense for obvious reasons. It's highly mobile, and it creates depth through that mobility, but it is broken into zones or AORs, areas of responsibility. You can see that if you're going to do this, you want to minimize the possibility of fratricide, so you need all sorts of maneuver control measures. Phase line this, phase line that, and you need to change them up once in a while just in case the bad guys are listening. And you do have ComSec, communication security. We can run wire. We can use runners and couriers, right, to communicate back and forth. If there's a village in here, we may use partisans inside the village to pass information. Yeah, it's a little risky, but it's definitely doable. So this is starting to look like a great big mess, but this is the way of the mobile defense. Again, it is not to say none shall pass. We know they're going to come in with more combat power than us. What we're trying to do is continuously find the choke points, find the angles of attack where we can harass or even hurt them, so that they cannot get to their objectives. They cannot have ease of use. They cannot have meaningful use of our area of responsibility. And that's essentially the mobile defense. Now, story time with Uncle Chris. I'll set the stage for you here. I was training with the Rakkasans way back in the day. This was dismounted air assault infantry. And we were tasked, after being in the field for, I don't remember, probably a week or two, and our patrol base was way far away. We were tasked with clearing 9 miles of highway in a very tight valley. And at the end of that 9 miles, I was with Alpha Company, 3rd Battalion, 187th Raksan Infantry, and we were aggressing against Charlie Company, 3rd Battalion, 187th Infantry, as is often is the case. This was company on company level, maneuver warfare. What had happened was, way up here at the mouth, Charlie Company apparently had set some defense that we never knew about. Other parts of the battalion were moving in and creating a kind of a pincer movement, and so Charlie Company's defense said, oh, this won't, we're enveloped now, this won't do, let's get out of here. So they did a 9-mile road march. And yes, the red dotted line is a highway. The blue is a slow-moving, fordable creek. It's not even a river. In most cases, it was a knee-deep. There are some places it might have gotten just slightly up to the head or slightly over the head, but most of it was rock-based. And this is, I want to say this is somewhere in Tennessee. Factually, it might have been Kentucky. It was somewhere around the border area. Anyhow, it's middle of the summer, hot, sticky, sweltering, mosquito-infested valley. It was actually quite beautiful. There were little farmhouses along the side of the road and stuff. So there's a road, there's a creek that goes through it, and off to either side you have a ridgeline. A ridgeline with just a series of hilltops. Now they weren't super high, but they were rather steep. This river had obviously over many thousands, millions of years, had made this pleasant flat valley in between the two ridge lines. But lots of great micro-terrain for Charlie Company to fight in. I could see why they had previously been up here to the east, and we were pushing them west. Our platoon was tasked with leading this, and following behind us were the rest of Alpha Company, right? The other two platoons in the headquarters section. But they followed quite a bit behind, and our platoon was tasked to do this. And so here's how we broke out. So the platoon maintained the headquarters team, as well as one squad in reserve. That's back here. It's a minus platoon. And they dispatched one 9-man squad this way and one 9-man squad that way. And I was actually on this 9-man squad. And so we pushed against what we thought we'd find was, that they had left a platoon or so back. And for a while, as I'll describe, that's very much what we believed we were fighting against. Because as we entered the valley right away, we came under fire from one of the hilltops from an enemy. And as we moved up and started to aggress them, just as soon as we got within shooting distance, again, this is miles, gear, and blanks, and this is dense vegetation, so we got in pretty close. How close? 40, 50, 60 meters, just enough where we could see them and go, oh, there they are, and they broke and ran. Well, we ran up and thinking there were more people on the high ground, we shot the living hell out of that. And it was exhausting. And they ran away. Well, we saw them run down towards the creek and knew that they were using that as a high-speed avenue of approach. So sure enough, we followed, or attempted to, only to come to fire from our immediate left. And so that was disconcerting. We said, oh, but we all saw them run that way. How did they must have looped back super fast and gotten here. And so we said, wow, that's really interesting. And I'll be honest, their fires weren't particularly effective, though they were suppressive at times. They were enough to let you know we were getting near misses. But we turned and we outnumbered them, so we fired up. And again, thinking we're attacking a squad, we get up there, and both times we are seeing 3, 4 people. We're like, well, that's a fire team. Well, there's a fire team. We really are seeing a crew, right? We're seeing 3. And so, well, there's 3 and there's 3. They're reporting the same thing over here. As soon as they started to march into the valley, they took fire and they attacked uphill the other squad. Well, as soon as they attacked, the enemy broke ranks, ran back, and relocated. And within minutes, as they were reconsolidating, as the other squad was reconsolidating, reorganizing on the hilltop, they were already taking distant pot shots from the next hilltop over. This fight would go as this squad would then try to maneuver on high ground to take over. That makes sense, conserve your strength. This team would do one of 2 things. They would either fall back to the next, or they would circle around and try to come up the back end. They were often, once we realized what they were doing, the reserves was able to stop them over here from doing that. We weren't as lucky on our side because they were getting much more effective at doing that. We would take the high ground. They would run to the next hilltop, and as soon as we started to go to that hilltop, we'd have a fire team behind us already. And so we're doing this loop-de-loop fight for hilltop to hilltop, and I'm going to be honest, it took us a minute to figure it out. When I say a minute, I mean probably the better part of an hour to figure out, okay, this is getting ridiculous. We've got to get some firepower down here in the center so that we can control their ability to circle behind us. And we did start using more effective use of our reserves then, so that by about afternoon, by about lunchtime, when we'd gotten all of maybe just a couple of miles down a 9-mile valley, we had found a pretty good spot where we could hold the line, and we knew that they were that way. We'd gotten them out from behind us and in front of us. But we spent the rest of this afternoon until nightfall. We spent fighting this team that we had, like I said, within probably about an hour calculated, this is 9 guys we're fighting. And they're holding up a 30-man platoon, which is the pushing element for an entire rifle company. I gotta admit, well, it's Rakkasan to Rakkasan, but we were all a little hats off to Charlie Company because they were giving us a run for our money. And of course, the way we finally solved it was, hey, guess what? All you guys back here, or at least most of you who thought you were going to get a nice, easy stroll as as first platoon kicked out and took the valley, and the rest of the Alpha Company would have this nice, easy stroll. We found out, no, we wound up around lunchtime putting all of our platoon here to clear, slowly, methodically, tediously, and we put another platoon up here, and then the 3rd platoon and headquarters section followed in the center. And believe it or not, that actually, they followed back behind, but it kept the enemy from running back and forth. It kept them from trying to, this team to put fire over here, because they were doing that in the morning. So we found better ways of controlling. It just took a whole lot of people, though. It took far more than you would think. Literally a 30-man front here, a 30-man front here, and really about 50 troops down here, command, control, and firepower to disrupt the enemy. But again, we were probably 2 miles into it by noon, and sundown at 8 o'clock that evening, 8 hours later, we had finally gotten up within striking distance of the Charlie Company defense. That 9-man squad had conducted an excellent mobile defense. They had bought time and space for their rifle company to get back and actually dig in fighting positions. And the truth is, I really don't remember what happened for the main fight the next day. But just what stuck with me was how effective that mobile defense worked at a squad level. And here's the kind of amazing thing. While this is Miles gear and you have OCs that can come and turn you back on, they respawn you into the simulation, primarily to keep you in training, and that's very important, but also under the auspice that you are reinforcements. And so what was really amazing about this operation was that casualties on both sides, but that squad itself, probably over the course of a 12-hour fight, probably lost no more than 4 or 5 of its 9 men, and which is huge, of course, when you say, well, that's 50% or better. Yeah, but the tenaciousness that they put this fight up, and the mobility that they managed to maintain, and the fact that they were fighting against overwhelming numbers, that's pretty amazing. Now, it's also interesting that I think the entire day, seriously, you lose track because of the other platoons, and you don't really understand what they're up against. But I know our platoon lost 4 people, so maybe altogether 6, 8 casualties during the entire operation. It was a very, very low casualty count. It was an incredibly high round count, like the consumption of ammunition, and also just physically exhausting. This wasn't a none shall pass. Instead, they were denying us the freedom of maneuver. We were always reacting to them. And I think that was the power That was the power of the mobile defense in buying time for their company to find superior terrain and dig into that. And oh, by the way, if you're saying, well, that mobile defense looks a whole lot like a retrograde, yeah, they are. And in fact, while we talk about retrograde, at different levels of, tactics and operations and unit structures, while we talk about that, and we need to understand what the purpose of the retrograde is, and in this case it very much was to buy time and space, the fact is that we implement a retrograde almost universally through a mobile defense. And this is one of the examples that, in my experience, where I was awed. I was on, I guess you'd say, the winning side, but certainly we were being schooled by a 9-man squad of our sister company. Thank you.